Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Trauma Verification's February Q&A web conference. For best sound quality, we recommend that you join audio through the telephone. If you are listening through your computer speaker system, simply open your control panel and select telephone in the audio pane. The dial-in information is then displayed. I would now like to introduce Rachel Tanchez and Megan Hutchins.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. Presenting today will be Megan Hutchins and myself. Unfortunately, Molly is a bit under the weather today, so she's out. So just to go over some items, to qualify for CE, you must attend at least 50 minutes of educational content. An email will be sent to all attendees who qualify for CE within 24 hours of the webinar, ending with instructions on how to claim CE. If you have any questions during the broadcast, please email cotvrc@facs.org. The goal for today's webinar is to interpret the standards outlined in the Resources for Optimal Care of the Injured Patient Manual to ensure that hospitals have an understanding of the criteria to provide quality care to the injured patient, and also to understand the processes and standards involved in an ACS Trauma Verification site visit, and how following these will positively impact the quality of care of the injured patient at your center. So let's get started. You may want to have on hand a copy of the Orange Book or a copy of the PDF version, and in case you want to refer to any criteria referenced in this presentation. And I just want to stress the importance of downloading the most current clarification document and the verification change log and using it in conjunction with the manual. These documents may be accessed through the VRC webpage, which is listed. And going forward, changes to the criteria will be published in the verification change log, and any clarifications to criteria will be published in the clarification document. So if you've been in the clarification document recently, you'll see that it's been shortened to display only those requirements with the clarification. And here's a sample of the verification change log. You could download and save this as an Excel file, and you could filter by any of the columns, just as you'd like. Okay. So the webinars are recorded during the session and will be posted within 1 week on the ACS YouTube channel. You may also access them via the VRC Resources webpage at that link. And just an FYI, this resources page is getting really long. So the webinars are showing up way at the bottom of the page. So you'll want to continue scrolling down. So we're hoping to be getting a menu link soon to house the webinars. All questions are pulled directly from the question submissions. There have been no edits made to the contents. So if you sent in your question and it's not answered today, the question may require more information, and you'll receive a response from the ACS staff within 1 week after the webinar. And just some announcements. The next verification Q&A webinar will be March 15th at 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. So deadline to submit the questions will be on March 2nd, 2018. Just an update on the resources revision process. You'll see the chart here, what's being worked on, the chapters that are being worked on. None of these have been released at this time, and the timeline has not yet been established for that. But you can go to the link that's listed here, and we strongly encourage everyone to review and comment on the standards. And also, just a reminder, there are some resources for trauma program managers and trauma medical directors who are new to our process. please feel free to visit these links below. There's one on frequently asked questions, and this list will definitely grow over time. And also becoming a verified trauma center, this would be very helpful for those who are new to the process. And I know also mentioned in the past, we have the Trauma Quality Program Participant Hub. The website is listed right here on the page. This hub is for TPMs and TMDs to access your account and update and manage any contact information or facility information that may have changed. Also, you could submit data and view reports on this hub. And if for any reason, if your primary contact has left your facility and you need assistance accessing the account center, please feel free to email the tquip@facs.org. The next slide is risk-adjusted benchmarking, CD 15.5. All trauma centers must use a risk-adjusted benchmarking system to measure performance and outcomes. Now, this is effective for visits scheduled after August 1st, 2018. Participation in TQIP best meets this requirement. However, other risk-adjusted benchmarking programs will be considered and must include the components outlined in the CD 15.5 requirements and rationale document. So you can find more information right there at the link listed. And moving on to some scheduling reminders. So we are still asking centers to send in your site visit applications at least 13 to 14 months in advance of the requested, of your requested dates or time frame. And again, this holds your spot, and in addition, it provides center plenty of time to prepare and complete the online PRQ. Right now, we are accepting applications for December 2018 and also all of 2019. And right now, I've been scheduling for July, August, and September, and we've recently had some openings for those months. So there's like we could take a few more visits for each of those months. So if you are interested in having your visit in July, August, or September, please let me know, okay? And also, we know that you send in your applications like 13 to 14 months in advance. So we understand there can be some staff changes like after that time. So we are asking if you could please let us know, especially for the trauma program manager, if there's been a change in the TMD as well as the administrator. This is so we can, when we're sending out confirmations or reports, it could become a challenge if we don't have the person we should be sending it to. So if you could let us know, that would be really helpful. And also, on the site visit applications, if you could also note credentials, like MD, RN, EMT, NP, or PA, so we can address the person properly on the final reports and confirmation letters. So regarding the OTL form, for new trauma centers that have not gone through our process, we will need the OTL form submitted with the site visit application. And this is required for level 1 trauma centers, level 1 pediatric trauma centers, level 1 adult, and level 2 pediatric trauma centers. The form is located on the link listed below. And for centers who have previously undergone a visit and are being re-verified, or if you have previously completed an OTL form and there's no change in the OTL, you're not required to submit another form. But if you've had any changes or are new to the process, please complete and submit an OTL form with the site visit application. As for the alternate pathway criteria, this is This is only for foreign trained physicians. The alternate pathway is not applicable to U.S. or Canadian residencies trained. The alternate pathway is not applicable to U.S. or Canadian residency trained physicians or surgeons. So if you have a surgeon that may need to go through the alternate pathway, you'll need to mark that on the site visit application and also send in the CV. And the reason we need this ahead of time, like when you're sending in your site visit application, because we may need some more information afterwards, and as well, this needs to be sent to a subcommittee for approval to go through the process itself. If your physician is approved, then an on-site evaluation by a member of the same specialty will be there on the visit to assess the 8 criteria, ATLS, CME, meeting attendance, etc., along with review of the clinical care. However, if your foreign trained surgeon has already been previously approved by way of alternate pathway, then they're not required to have another review by the specialist at the time of the visit. However, they are required to meet the alternate pathway criteria. Pre-review questionnaire, online access. So once your site visit application has been received, the VRC office will provide you with an email, and that usually comes from Anita Johnson. So you'll get a receipt of confirmation, and in the body of that email will be your PRQ logins. And just a side note, so if your TPM changes after this has been sent, you'll definitely want to notify us, because we could change the logins for your new trauma program manager. So for site visit application payment, please do not submit payment with the application. Your center will receive an invoice approximately 60 to 90 days before scheduling the visit. And your center will be billed annually for the trauma quality program fee. Again, there's a great fee structure at the link below. So scheduling site visits. So a new scheduling process was implemented for the second quarter of 2018. And we believe that it's worked out really well in getting centers scheduled site visit dates well before the 90 days before the visit. And so what I've been doing is scheduling this by quarterly. So right now I'm working on July, August, and September. So if your time frame was in the third quarter, you should have received an email from me asking you to provide us with the exact dates that you would like to have the visit. And more than likely, your visit will occur on those chosen dates. And I believe this has also been changed on the site visit application so that you can now provide us with exact dates that you would like your visit. This really cuts down on the back and forth of the emails. And so once the review team has been secured with your dates, then an email confirmation will be emailed to you. It will list all the reviewers and all their complete contact information as well. And so this will typically be scheduled within 120 days prior to the scheduled site visit. So we're pretty excited about that and hope you are too. So as far as site visit preparation, the reviewers will still be making their own arrangements through the ACS travel agent, and they usually make those flight arrangements approximately 20 to 30 days prior to the site visit. And the hospital is responsible for the site reviewers' hotel accommodations as well as their ground transportation. And we also ask you to please contact the reviewers directly within 30 days of the site visit, so that way you can get their flight itinerary or email their hotel confirmations, or coordinate ground transportation, just any logistical information. And definitely, reminding you to reach out to the lead reviewer just to make sure everything's set, and if they need anything further for their site visit, definitely don't want no surprises on the visit. So I will leave off with Megan answering some general questions.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Hi, everybody. My name is Megan Hutchins. I'm one of the program coordinators for the VRC. So I'm one of the people that will be moving around your reports through the peer review process after your visit. Pinch hitting for Molly today, as Rachel said. Molly's feeling under the weather. I always said if I ever ended up doing one of these, I would just do my best Molly impression and act like nothing was wrong. So yeah, my Chicago accent really isn't very good though. So, hey everybody, it's Molly. So yeah, see, it doesn't have her je ne sais quoi. So Molly might be in the audience, so I'm gonna stop this before I get fired. All right, so we just have a few general questions and we're gonna start off with the focused review process. Please explain the process of chart prep for a focused review. Do we pull 10 charts from each category or just the CD ones? What data time frame should be used? Do the same charts get used again that were used for the original review, or are they all new ones? So do not pull the same charts from the initial review. You'll generally have like at least 1 or 2 members from the original site visit, so they've seen those charts. The time period will differ based on when the resolution on the CDs began. So commencing from the point of when those changes that impact the deficiencies were made, have available on-site medical charts and EMR related to the deficiencies cited. All indicated materials must be available and organized systematically as instructed in the focused review agenda. You will have a limited quantity of medical charts and should align with the categories if there were changes that impacted that process. So one for telemedicine. Is telemedicine an acceptable substitute for specialty consults, such as OMFS and OPFO, to determine the need for transfer out? So unfortunately, telemedicine is not an acceptable method for consult. The expectation is that the specialist must be physically available in person at bedside by a predefined time when the request is made. So we have one on the alternate pathway. I know that periprosthetic fractures are not included in NTDB data. So my question is, if I have a trauma patient with other injuries in addition to a periprosthetic fracture, can that fracture be repaired by an orthopedist that specializes in these injuries, yet is not board certified and does not take call for trauma? Does he need to go through the alternate pathway process? So if the surgeon in question is treating trauma patients, then he would need to go through the alternate pathway. However, if the other injuries are traumatic and a board-certified orthopedic surgeon is managing those injuries, and that patient is then transferred to the specialist that's specializing in periprosthetic, this would be acceptable. It must be clearly documented and reviewed through the PIPS process, however, so you'd want to have that documentation available. So we have one on thromboelastography, or TEG. So the manual states thromboelastography should be available at level 1 and 2 trauma centers. Does available mean required? So this is kind of a semantic thing in the Orange Book, just sort of how we delineate between like what is related to deficiencies and what is like an opportunity for improvement that we recommend. So when you see should, like the trauma center should have something, that's basically a recommendation. We're not going to ding you for it if you don't have it. So if you see should, it's just a recommendation. Must, like the trauma center must have this, must have that, must do that. That is related to a deficiency. So thromboelastography is recommended, but not required. So here's one for peer review minutes. In a previous webinar regarding the dissemination of PIPS committee minutes, it was stated that the intent is the TMD and/or liaisons provide the panel members with the information and have a mechanism to track it. Does this mean that the minutes are sent and tracked to all the trauma attendings, including who attended the meeting, or just to those that are not attending? And is it acceptable to send the PIPS minutes to the liaison, who will then disseminate any service-specific information and discussion, or must we distribute and track for all trauma panel members from neuro, ortho, emergency medicine, diagnostic, anesthesia, etc.? So to clarify, peer review follow-ups may be disseminated to those that did not attend. In addition, the TMD may disseminate to the liaisons, and They in turn can disseminate to their panel members, so the neuro liaison can disseminate to the neuro panel and so on. Furthermore, the minutes do not need to be tracked unless they're being part of your internal education process. So one for trauma flow sheet. We received a weakness. The trauma flow sheet via the EMR is very difficult to follow and contains a large amount of extraneous info that may encumber the PI process. The flow sheet is in chronological order and contains all orders and assessments. Is it sufficient to address this issue by creating a PI form that is auto-populated with pertinent info from trauma registry data? Yeah, that would be acceptable. So in an effort not to create more work for the nurse or scribe, just consider not capturing like the extraneous information that may not necessarily be needed in the flow sheet. So one for the PRQ. Please clarify which PRQ is to be used for a combined level 1 adult trauma center and a level 1 pediatric trauma center. So yeah, on the resources repository, which is linked there below, you'll find links to Word documents for all the various PRQs. They'll have like different levels, L1 adult, L1 peds, and then combined, you'll find some links for L1 adult, L2 peds. So the thing is with level 1 and level 1 adult, level 1 peds, since that involves 2 separate PRQs and you'd have 2 separate reports at the end of the process, you would actually just go to the links for both the L1 adult and L1 peds. So you just use both of them in your preparation for the visit. We got another one for the PRQ. So PRQ, this is chapter 2, question 5, asks for ED visits with ICD-9 code 800 to 959.9. We use ICD-10 codes now. Which ICD-10 codes should we be using? So I went back and double checked just to make sure that the online PRQ and Word versions have been updated to not reflect the language of ICD-9 codes. So for verification, the injury codes are not defined. We're going to take this into consideration for the next revision of the PRQ, but yeah, just to reiterate, the language for ICD-9 codes has been removed. All right, so another one for trauma registry inclusion. Do you know the percentage of facilities that include isolated hip fractures in their registry? So the inclusion of these types of patients vary based on the institution's policy on admission and also state inclusion criteria. So your state might require different things. In some instances, both the institution and state criteria are the same, and in others they differ. In the latter, the institution may have to capture 2 sets of data. All right, we got one for trauma rounds. For level 3 facilities, how often and who should participate in the trauma rounds? So the verification process does not define who should be included in trauma rounds. This will vary by your institution. And we've got one for trauma team activation protocol. Table 3 in chapter 5. Is this to be followed exactly or just a recommendation protocol? So for the full trauma team activation, the minimum criteria must be included. So you'll want to refer to Table 2, page 38. The center may add additional criteria to this activation. The limited tier will be defined by the institution along with protocols for when the surgeon is expected to respond. All right, we got one for verification and TQIP. How is the TQIP report expected to be used in the verification process? Excellent question. This has come up before in some past webinars, but just to reiterate, so basically hospitals are not required to have received a TQIP benchmark report at the time of their verification visit. But if you do have one, we ask that hospitals have their last TQIP report on hand to discuss with the reviewers if requested. So TQIP reports are a good opportunity for hospitals to showcase their PI process. Hospitals are not being penalized or lauded for their TQIP results alone, so just keep that in mind. TQIP staff provide a summary of the hospital's TQIP results to the reviewers along with an executive summary and explanation of how to interpret results. All right, one for the verification process. Do the unfilled positions in the hospital trauma program weigh heavily on the decision to verify a trauma center? based on what information is just in the question here, yes, it can weigh heavily on whether a deficiency is cited, depending on what the positions are. The expectation is that all resources and providers are in place at the time of the visit. Warming measures. Are warm blankets considered warming measures? I love this question. Just seems so obvious from a layperson perspective. While there are no specific criteria to warming measures, a warming blanket is one method that you could use. So in other words, yes, warming blankets are warming. All right, and here's some CD-related questions. So one for admission volume related to CD24. Can a supracondylar fracture treated at the ED and discharged with next day scheduled operative repair be counted towards admission volume? For verification purposes, an admission is defined as a stay greater than 23 hours with a traumatic injury admitted to the trauma service. So based on the description above, this would not meet inclusion criteria, so you wouldn't want to include that in your numbers. All right, we got one for OPPE and FPPE related to CD 511. Is it expected that so the subject's missing here. I am assuming that is TMD. Will sign off on the FPPE and OPPE annual assessment for ortho, neuro, emergency medicine, and anesthesia. So if the question is referring to the TMD, if I am incorrect in making that assumption, I apologize to the asker. If it's referring to TMD signing off on FPPE and OPPE for specialty providers, so the expectation that we have is that the OPPE for all specialists is performed by their respective directors, but just there will be oversight from the TMD in that case. And we got another one for OPPE. What should the OPPE documentation show for level 3? So there are a few examples of OPPE on the VRC Resources Repository website. The expectation is that the trauma medical director is conducting the OPPE, or the designated specialty liaison or director, and has a process, a scorecard, template, report, something physical available to present on site if asked. And you can feel free to check out the resources link and just search OPPE. There's a link on there for various examples. All right, one for the trauma medical director. Can the level 1 TMD be a level 2 TMD as well? No, this would not be in compliance with criteria, unfortunately. So the TMD must be dedicated to the facility undergoing verification and cannot direct more than one trauma center. So just keep that in mind. All right, so fellow trained as the attending CD 514. So for highest level activations, can an ATLS trauma trained fellow fill in the gap for the attending physician, or is the attending always required to be at the bedside within 15 minutes for a highest level activation? So this is for a state level 1 pediatric center. So the surgery fellow who is board certified or board eligible can act as the initial responder for the highest level of activation, just as long as they're credentialed by the institution to do so. All right, we have one for non-surgical admissions. So we have a level 3 consultative visit coming up in August. We have a question regarding, let's see, many of our older fall patients are admitted by our hospitalist service due to comorbidities. Nearly all of them have immediate consults, general surgery, and or ortho. Must these all be reviewed by the trauma committee? So the short answer is no. They do not need to be reviewed by the trauma committee. If you are following the NSA grid on it's page 121 of the resources manual, and those that fall outside the grid should be reviewed by you and the trauma medical director. All right, so we have a question about ATLS. Do all surgeons and ED physicians at an L3 need to be current in ATLS? So this has some nuance to it depending on the provider and their board certification. So all general surgeons and all emergency physicians who are boarded in emergency medicine specifically must have successfully completed the ATLS course at least once. However, for emergency physicians that are boarded in anything else other than emergency medicine, so this could be pediatrics, this could be internal medicine, this could be family medicine, anything else other than emergency, who treat trauma patients must have current ATLS status, so could not have just taken it once, have to be current. All right, will level 3 with neurosurgical capabilities criteria be clarified? Yes, I will clarify it now. So level 3 centers must meet the criteria specified in Chapter 8. That means CDs 8.5, 8.6, 8.7, 8.8, 8.9, 8.10, and 8.13. So the online PRQ will appropriately display those questions based on whether the center has neuro capabilities. At the very start of Chapter 8, it will ask you, does your center provide neuro care? If you answer yes or no, the questions will appear or disappear depending on that response. All right, so question about the surgical director. So the surgical director of the pediatric intensive care unit should be, there's some things in between there, and then it ends with should be board certified in surgical critical care. Does should mean must? So again, this is just kind of like one of the semantic things in the Orange Book. So as per the clarification document, page 27, the surgical director of the PICU must participate actively in the administration of the unit as evidenced by development of pathways and protocols for care of the surgical patient in the ICU and in unit-based PI. They should be board certified in surgical critical care, but like we discussed before, this is not a requirement in a pediatric center. This is just a recommendation. So yeah, they don't have to be board certified or eligible in SCC. Okay, here's one for peer review meeting attendance. Does our board certified pediatric surgeon need to attend peer review 50% of the time, or just PED specific peer reviews? So if this is a combined center, and I am assuming that it is, the pediatric surgeons or adult surgeons are not required to attend both peer review meetings. However, there has to be a representative. This could be the TMD. This could be any other designated designee from the adult program or pediatric program designated to attend the other meeting. And then this representative must ensure that any discussions during the meeting are disseminated amongst the other panel members. So this is a quick one. So for anesthesia, what is the new anesthesia requirement for a level 2? There have been no changes to the anesthesia in-house requirements. So for APPs, CD 1186. Our emergency department APPs required to be current in ATLS for ED-specific activations. In our institution, ED-specific activations, i.e. trauma expedite, are designed for the timely evaluation, processing of diagnostics, and potential upgrade to limited or full-tier activations internal to the ED. So, based on the scenario provided, if the ED-specific activations are similar to fast track, the requirement does not extend to those APPs. All right, here's one for burn patients, CD 14.1. Can a non-verified trauma center but designated burn center with the state receive burn-only patients? So yes, you can transfer to those centers. There must, however, be a written transfer agreement in place. So yeah, that should be clear in documentation. Got one for the registrar, CD 15.9. Requirements for full-time registrar in addition to a full-time trauma program manager if we are placing 450 to 498 in the registry. So for a level 3 trauma center, it's important to note that the trauma program manager may also act as the registrar. So just keep that in mind for a level 3 facility. All right, we got a few on alcohol screening. So for CD 18.3, expert clarification, activations that are discharged from the ED require screen and intervention if positive. As per the revised criteria, a minimum of 80% of patients who meet NTDS inclusion criteria with a hospital stay of greater than 24 hours must have an expert screening. Additionally, all patients who screen positive must receive a documented intervention by appropriately trained staff as per CD 18.4. If the patients are not admitted and released from the ED within less than 24 hours, they're not subjected to the screening. However, this may differ based on your hospital policy. And got another one on alcohol screening. In our institution, we perform an ETO on ETO level on all trauma activations. Trauma consults receive CAGE on admission to the floor. Is it acceptable if we screen at least 80% between these two screens? If they screen and then a social worker has to perform the SBIRT, is that requirement 80% as well? It is acceptable to use the two types of screening, so the CAGE and the ETO. If the patient screened positive, the requirement is that the social worker or credentialed provider should provide some means of referral. This is not inclusive, however, of the 80% threshold. All right, what is the requirement for SBIRT documentation? There should be a screening toolkit that's developed and used by the hospital. The data must be documented in the progress notes medical record. So yeah, that should just be clear to the reviewers when they're going through the charts. All right, time for my favorite subject and yours, CME. So we got a few for level 3s, and we get this one from time to time. Just asking, like, who has to meet the CME requirements? Is there a CME requirement for the TMD at a level 3, and do they need to be current in ATLS? So there is actually no CME requirement for level 3 trauma centers at all. However, in the case of like the second part of the second question there for the TMD would still need to be current in ATLS as per CD 56. So just keep that in mind. So to reiterate, no CME requirements for level 3 trauma centers. All right, now, can a PALS course be used to meet the pediatric CME requirements for trauma surgery and the external CME requirements for surgical specialty and PICU liaisons involved in the care of pediatric trauma patients? Yes, so the PALS course is acceptable to meet the external trauma-related CME requirement. So yeah, that can be used in meeting your verification requirements. All right, so for a freestanding ED, do the patients practicing there need to maintain CME if they do not care for trauma in their main hospital? So there are actually no requirements for the freestanding ED. So yeah, the answer is no. So what is the physician CE requirement? So one important thing, it is, we do want to distinguish that our criteria relate to CME specifically, so continuing medical education, rather than CE, like what we're offering for today's presentation. So physicians taking call at L1 and L2 facilities are expected to have a minimum of 16 hours of CME per year. This adds up to a total of at least 48 hours of CME during the 3-year verification period. Doesn't have to be like 16 exactly from year to year to year, as long as it all adds up to 48 at the end of the 3-year period. So this number can be prorated for surgeons who recently completed training, surgeons who recently joined the trauma call panel, centers that are undergoing their first verification or consultation, and military deployment, medical leave, and missionary work. And also on the subject of the last bullet point there, that also can be used to prorate attendance at the PI committee, just as a heads up. All right, one for locums, and we also get this one quite a bit. Do locums trauma surgeons need to meet the same requirements as core trauma surgeons for CMEs and peer review? Also, as a quick note, core trauma surgeons and non-core, we don't actually have that distinction anymore. So in a word, yes. For all trauma centers, locums treating trauma patients must meet the credentialing process and same requirements as other physicians and surgeons. This means board certification, this means CME or IEPs, this means peer review. So yeah, definitely keep that in mind for the locums that are serving on your call panel. And that is the last question. Thanks so much for, sorry. I'm actually going to turn this over to Tammy Morgan. That's just some final notes for today.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining us today. You heard a different voice today, didn't you, Megan? That was great. You did a great job. I just wanted to talk to you guys a little bit. If you have to have a couple of minutes, please stay on. One of the things that we're doing is we are trying to come up with some good education for that talks about trauma verification. And so there are all types of folks out there, program manager wise. There's the new program manager that's just gotten the job, that's never never done a verification site survey. We've got a returning trauma program manager coming back for re-verification, and things have changed. And so we want to hear from you about what types of education do you feel would be helpful. Now, one of the things that I know that if anybody's ever called Molly or sent Molly an email, you know it takes time, and it's because of the volume of email that we get and the volume of calls that we get. And one question turns into sometimes 45 minutes on the phone talking to somebody to talk them through. So Molly has made some education about, you know, so you want to be a trauma center, first steps. And so if you have those questions, instead of sitting on the phone with you for an hour, she points you in the direction of that tutorial. And then, of course, if you still have questions, then you come back to us and let us know what those are. We're also working about expanding a frequently asked questions document. And Molly's working on even some more education, and I'm not going to waste your time telling you about today. But if you would, if you think about it, let us know. Drop us a line and let us know what you think would be helpful. Even if you've had some of our education, let us know that this is good, but let me tell you what would really help me. We're trying to get that volume down in our inbox so it doesn't take so much time for you to get an answer to our question. Because I know when you have an answer, for example, on the PRQ, that's a really important question, and you need it right away, or at least you feel like you do. And so we're trying to provide, you know, ways to get those answered to you more rapidly. And this webinar is one of the first things that we tried. It was something that it worked with TQIP, and so we tried it with this, and it seems to be really successful. Folks really seem to like it. So the other thing I want to talk to you about is just give you an update on what we're doing here at the college. As you know, even though if you work in the trauma world, that's your only world, right? But we also have verification and accreditation programs in cancer, maybe one that you're most familiar with if you've been at your hospital a while. There's a cancer accreditation, we have geriatrics, we have bariatrics, and we have so many other programs like that popping up. And so one of the things that is a charge for us at the college is to align our programs. And you know, I came from the hospital world, so, you know, when I first heard this, you kind of feel like, well, so what? Well, who it really makes a difference to is your hospital administrator. When they're saying, well, why do I have to, you know, do things this way for my cancer accreditation, and I have to do something completely different for my trauma center verification, and they're basically the same thing. So we're looking at, you know, aligning our standards, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. But other things we're doing is we're looking at, well, what can we do with something as small as our certificates that come back to you, our PRQ that comes back to you. And here we've all been kind of siloed in the past in these programs, and we have been this past year coming together, and so you're really going to start seeing some changes, or I should say your hospital administrator will, and it will make it more, you know, understandable to those types of folks, your VPs and administrators. So one of the things I mentioned is the change in the standards. Now, the last year, I know that Molly has given you guys a shout out for you to go to our website and give us feedback for our chapter revisions in our orange books, our resource document. It's time to revise that. We don't want it to be another 7-year wait for that revision to happen. And one of the things that we realized in the process of the last chapter revision group that was around for the orange book is once they put that out, we found that there were so many problems, hence the fact that the clarification document is so long. And so we had to just go back and kind of clean up. And so in this round of chapter revisions, we want to do things differently. Those shout outs for your stakeholder feedback are so important. So I want to thank you first of all, because it may be that we're a little silent on what's happened with that now, but man, we have really been busy that is a combination of our PIPS program and our verification program as far as how those chapter revisions are managed. Each chapter has its own specific work group that has a surgeon lead. We have many STN nurse partners that we have to work with at the college, and there's a nurse partner assigned, a couple of them assigned to each chapter. So because, you know, I know as program manager, you make a lot of things happen when it comes to that verification. You make most things happen when it comes to that verification site survey. And so we certainly want a nursing perspective and input. And then in our process, that is the first step. That stakeholder feedback is the first step of the process. First, you have to, we put out a call for your feedback. We give you a deadline. We take that. It has its own software. We analyze it. We put it in a report for these chapter revision teams, and that's the first thing they look at is what do our participants have to say about this? And then the second thing is we go to the clarification document, and we want to incorporate everything that's in the clarification document into our new chapter revisions to make it more clear. And Molly is a part of this. I'm a part of these teams too, so we can, you know, nobody knows better than Molly, right, when something needs to be clarified, because she's the one clarifying it. And sometimes having to go back to our VRC chairs and say, hey, this is not clear enough for our participants. What can we put in the clarification document that makes sense to them? So we have piloted a chapter. We've completed it. Part of that process is also not just the chapter, but what are the PRQ questions going to be for that chapter? And then for the first time, each chapter will have education. So those surgeon leads and nurse partners that are, and the other surgeons that are on those teams, and those surgeons are part of 2 surgeons from TQIP, 2 surgeons from our PIPS program, and 2 surgeons that are on the VRC committee. So we've got really good teams working to provide you education on each chapter. So that'll be something that will come out in the form of a tutorial that will be something that not only educates you, but the reviewer as well as we launch a new chapter, so that everybody's on the same page and all reviewers are on the same page, because I've heard feedback on that too. And so anyways, I just wanted to share with you what's going on. We piloted chapter 6. That was short and sweet chapter that we could get, you know, kind of pilot and get done quickly and determine, okay, what do we need to change and how we do this process moving forward. And we're just about through with chapter 10, which is PEDS. We're working on ortho. We're working on trauma registry. We've got injury prevention going. We've got research going. And then we have also just not too long ago have put out a call for some more stakeholder feedback for the remaining chapters. And you may see some differences in how we do things in our chapters. You may see a chapter go away and kind of be combined with something else. But we're working hard to do that. And the number one charge was for us in this chapter revisions is to make things easier for the hospitals, and that's what we are hoping to do. So if you have anything to add to what I've just told you, or any feedback for me, it's not going to be in the form of where you go to a stakeholder feedback survey. It will be just at the regular COT inbox email. Just send me drop me a line if you have any ideas, if you have any feedback or comments. Let me know. Let us know how the education is for you. You know, if you think back as recent as a year and a half ago, we had none. We just didn't. And what we did have, though, is we had a lot of other organizations educating on our programs, and Molly was cleaning up a lot of messes. And, you know, it's not that those all the education from those other organizations were wrong, but not always were they right. So we want to be able you to have firsthand education, and so just let us know if there's anything anything else that you'd like to see. We're also working on, as you know, our TQIP best practice guidelines. You know, we're trying to also integrate and align what happens in verification with TQIP. It's kind of been like, okay, we have to be in a benchmarking program, but you know, what do we really need to do with that? And that's something that we're trying to work on, and trying to help you understand how can you take your TQIP and be successful in integrating that into your PI program. So we're working on things like that too. And you may see it, you may not see a change individually if you don't have a verification review coming up, but if you do in the future, you will notice that we've really added TQIP to what those reviewers are looking at. And it's not about your status, it's are you using it? Are you taking it? Are you drilling down? Are you working it into your PI program? So anyways, I don't want to talk too long. I've talked long enough. I just wanted to give you an update on what's going on in trauma center programs. And so thank you for joining us again today. Good job, Megan and Rachel. And we'll talk to you again next month. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, trauma verification staff, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar, Trauma Verification's February Q&A web conference. If you have any other questions, please contact cotvr@facs.org. On behalf of Trauma Verification and our presenters, thank you for joining us and have a great rest of your day.